Ghosts don't wear diamond rings. But Malcolm Hayes would swear he was seeing one. Standing across his Beverly Hills ballroom was a waitress. Young, terrified, ordinary, except for the platinum band catching light on her finger. The ring that disappeared in the fire that killed his wife and daughter 23 years ago. A ring that shouldn't exist. Malcolm has 10 seconds to decide. Is this woman a thief, a con artist, or the miracle that will destroy him all over again? "This diamond ring belongs to my wife," Malcolm Hayes declared, his voice slicing through the symphony and champagne laughter. The Beverly Hills mansion ballroom fell silent. Crystal glasses froze mid-toast. The string quartet's bows stopped moving. Malcolm Hayes, tech titan, Silicon Valley legend, the man whose AI empire had reshaped the world, stood rigid near the champagne fountain, his icy blue eyes locked on something impossible, pointing at one of the catering staff, his face drained of color, caught between fury and disbelief. The waitress stood paralyzed, silver tray trembling in her grip. Her almond-shaped hazel green eyes widened with confusion, then terror. What had she done? Why was everyone staring? "Sir, her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Where did you get that ring?" Malcolm advanced, each step measured, controlled. But his hands shook. 2 security guards materialized instantly, unsure whether they were protecting their employer or restraining him. Hollywood executives and venture capitalists set down their drinks. The room held its breath. Before we continue, subscribe to our channel. We bring to life the extraordinary stories of families torn apart and reunited by fate. The DJ killed the music. 300 pairs of eyes tracked the confrontation unfolding on the marble floor. Jada Elise Carter instinctively touched her right hand, where the platinum band caught the chandelier light. A small diamond ring, delicate and worn. Heat flooded her cheeks. Had she somehow stolen something? Was she about to be arrested in front of Silicon Valley royalty? "I didn't steal it, sir, I swear." The words tumbled out, desperate. "This ring has been mine since I was a child." Malcolm closed the distance between them until he could see every detail. The platinum setting. The single diamond catching light like a trap star. And inside the band, he knew without looking, the engraving that would destroy him. The engraving reads, "M. loves N forever. Malcolm and Naomi forever." The ring he designed for his wife's 30th birthday. One of 2 matching pieces. The adult version buried with Naomi's ashes after the Bel Air mansion fire. The child-sized version meant for their daughter Lila's 18th birthday. His daughter, who was 3 years old when fire consumed their home 23 years ago. His daughter, whose body was never found. Malcolm felt the floor tilt beneath his custom Italian shoes. He gripped the champagne table's edge, knuckles white. "Everyone out," he commanded, voice hoarse and raw. "Now." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, shock, curiosity, outrage at being dismissed. But no one dared question Malcolm Hayes. Within 15 minutes, the grand ballroom emptied like water through a drain. Only Malcolm, the terrified young woman, and 2 stone-faced security guards remained in the cavernous space. Malcolm forced himself to breathe, to think like the strategist who'd built a billion-dollar empire. But his mind kept short-circuiting on the impossible. The ring glinting on her finger, the ring that should not exist. He studied her properly now. Mid-20s, maybe 26. Medium dark caramel skin. Shoulder-length natural curls. 3C texture. Beautiful features, fear written across them. "What's your name?" Malcolm asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Jada, sir." She swallowed hard. "Jada Elise Carter." "Jada." He repeated it like testing foreign sounds on his tongue. "I need you to tell me something. Think carefully before you answer." Jada's fingers pressed hard against the tray, her only anchor. "Where exactly did you get that ring?" She took a shaking breath, organizing thoughts that had never mattered to anyone before. I don't know for certain, sir. I grew up at Harbor Lights Group Home in Compton. The director, Mrs. Loretta Jackson, gave it to me when I was 7. She said I was already wearing it when they found me." Malcolm's pulse hammered in his ears. "Found you? How did they find you?" Jada's voice dropped, remembering the story she'd been told 100 times, but never fully believed mattered. Police found me wandering the 405 freeway near LAX when I was 3 or 4 years old. I was alone, injured. She paused, then pushed up her left sleeve, revealing faint burn scars that curled along her wrist like frozen flames. Burns on my arm. I didn't speak. Didn't remember anything. Just cried. The words hit Malcolm like physical blows. 405 freeway. Burns. 3 or 4 years old. The age Lila was when she disappeared. The fire happened at night. They'd searched every hospital, every morgue, every foster facility within 50 miles. They'd found Naomi's remains in the East Wing. But Lila, I spent months in the hospital, Jada continued, her voice distant, then went to Harbor Lights. Mrs. Jackson kept the ring safe until I was old enough to understand it was important. She said. Jada's eyes glistened. She said maybe someone would come looking for me because of it. Malcolm pressed his hand to his mouth, the gesture barely containing the sound threatening to escape. Guarulhos became 405 freeway. Burns. 3 years old. The impossibility was calcifying into something terrifyingly possible. Ma'am, I mean sir. Jada's voice pulled him back. Malcolm looked directly into her eyes. Really looked. And there it was. What his rational mind had been denying, but his heart recognized instantly. The almond shape, his eyes, but warmer. The slight upturn at the outer corners, Naomi's. The way her left eyebrow lifted when she was confused, exactly like Naomi when she was thinking. The dimple on her right cheek that appeared when her mouth tightened in fear. His wife's dimple. On this stranger's face. Lila. My Lila Bean. How old are you? The question came out strangled. 26, I think. I'm not exactly sure. They had to estimate based on how old I looked when they found me. 26. Lila would be 26 this December. Silence pressed down on them, heavy as the crystal chandeliers overhead. Jada shifted nervously, completely unaware of the world cracking open around them. Malcolm struggled between the hope detonating in his chest and the fear of being destroyed again. He'd spent 23 years building walls around the wound. Now this young woman with burned scars and his wife's dimple was threatening to demolish everything. Do you? His voice failed. He tried again. Do you remember anything from before the shelter? Jada bit her lip, the exact gesture Naomi made when uncertain. I always thought they were just strange dreams. Sometimes I dream about a big room. Toys everywhere. A song playing. Always the same melody. A woman's voice singing. It smells like... She closed her eyes, reaching for fragments. Like something sweet and woody at the same time. Peach cobbler mixed with cedarwood, maybe. Malcolm's legs nearly gave out. Naomi's signature perfume. Cedarwood and amber. Naomi's Sunday tradition. Peach cobbler with extra cinnamon. Naomi's bedtime ritual. This little light of mine. Hummed while rocking Lila to sleep. And then fire, Jada whispered, eyes still closed. So much fire. Someone's carrying me, running. I'm screaming. And then, she opened her eyes, looking lost. Then I wake up. Every word was a knife sliding between Malcolm's ribs. His composure, the legendary control that commanded boardrooms and intimidated competitors, shattered completely. My God, he breathed, tears breaking free for the first time in 23 years. My God, you're her. Jada stumbled back, shaking her head. Sir, I don't understand. Malcolm's hand trembled as he reached into his shirt, pulling out the platinum chain he'd worn for 2 decades. Dangling from it, the adult version of the ring on Jada's finger. Identical but larger. Same engraving. Same single diamond. This ring. His voice cracked. I had it made for my wife, Naomi, for her 30th birthday. One of a matching set. The other was sized for a child. For our daughter. He looked up, meeting Jada's terrified, confused gaze. For our daughter Lila, to be given when she turned 18. Jada's hand flew to the ring, touching it like it might burn her. Our house caught fire in Bel Air 23 years ago. We searched every hospital, every shelter, every police station in Los Angeles County. But we never. Malcolm's composure dissolved. "We never thought to look as far as the 4:05. We never imagined you'd survived, been found that far away." Jada felt the ballroom spin. Her entire life, the emptiness, the feeling that something was missing, the dreams that made no sense, suddenly cohering into an impossible truth. "You're saying I'm—" She couldn't finish. "You're saying I'm your daughter?" Malcolm nodded, not trusting his voice. The silence between them hummed with 23 years of grief, loss, and fragile, terrifying hope. Jada touched the ring she'd worn every day since she was 7 years old. The small circle of platinum that had been her only connection to a past she couldn't remember. And for the first time in her life, standing in a billionaire's empty ballroom while her world rewrote itself, Jada wondered if the ring hadn't been protecting her. Maybe it had been waiting to bring her home. Malcolm stood motionless in the empty ballroom, watching Jada's silhouette disappear into the elevator. The doors closed with a soft chime that echoed through the cavernous space like a bell tolling. 23 years. 23 years of controlled grief, of building empires to fill the void, of wearing Naomi's ring against his chest like penance. And now this. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, then stopped. Not yet. First, he needed to be sure. He needed to see the rings side by side, needed to confirm what his heart already knew, but his mind refused to accept. Malcolm took the service elevator to the 3rd floor, his reflection in the polished steel doors showing a man he barely recognized. Silver hair disheveled, tie loosened, eyes raw with something dangerous. Hope. He knocked on the guest suite door. "Jada, may I come in?" A pause. Then, yes. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her catering uniform, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked small in the expansive room, out of place among the silk drapes and designer furniture. When she looked up, Malcolm saw it again, the ghost of Naomi in the curve of her cheek, the shape of her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, closing the door behind him. "I know this is overwhelming, but I need to see the ring more closely, if that's all right." Jada hesitated, then slowly slid the ring off her finger. Her hand looked naked, without it, vulnerable. Malcolm sat in the armchair across from her, maintaining distance, not trusting himself to get closer. He pulled his own chain over his head, the adult ring swinging free. They placed both rings on the glass coffee table between them. Side by side, the truth was undeniable. The same platinum setting, the same single diamond cut. But where Malcolm's ring was sized for a woman's finger, Jada's was smaller, delicate, made for a child's hand. "May I?" Malcolm asked, gesturing to Jada's ring. She nodded, mute. His hands trembled as he picked it up, turning it toward the light. The interior was worn smooth from years of wear, but the engraving was still there, faint but legible, which reads, M. Loves. N forever. The same inscription. Exact. Malcolm's vision blurred. His mind catapulted backward through time, smashing through the walls he'd built. 2002, December 18th. Their Bel Air mansion. Naomi laughing in the kitchen, flour on her nose, pulling a peach cobbler from the oven. The scent of cinnamon and brown sugar filling the house. Lila, 3 years old, curly-haired, impossibly beautiful, sat at the kitchen island, sneaking bites of raw dough. "Daddy," she'd squealed when he came in. "Mommy says we can have cobbler for breakfast." "Only if Daddy says yes," Naomi had corrected, shooting him that smile, the one with the dimple that made him weak. He'd kissed her temple, breathed in her cedarwood perfume. "How can I say no to my girls?" Later that night, after Lila was asleep, he'd presented Naomi with the ring. The larger one. The one now hanging from his neck. "Malcolm Hayes," she'd whispered, tears in her eyes. "You ridiculous, romantic man." "There's another one," he'd admitted. "Smaller. For Lila. For her 18th birthday. So she'll always know. She'll always have a piece of us with her." Naomi had kissed him then, deep and grateful. 6 hours later, their bedroom filled with smoke. Screams. Fire. Naomi shaking him awake. He remembered running through flames, searching. The east wing collapsing. Firefighters dragging him back. Naomi's body recovered days later. Lila never found. Only ashes. Only absence. Only the adult ring they'd pulled from the rubble, which he'd worn ever since. Mr. Hayes? Jada's voice pulled him back. His cheeks were wet. I'm sorry, he managed. The night of the fire, I'd hidden this ring. He gestured to the smaller one. In Lila's room. In her toy chest. I was going to give it to my wife to keep safe, but... His voice broke. I never got the chance. Jada leaned forward slightly, her fear softening into something else. Curiosity. Maybe compassion. What happened? She asked quietly. Malcolm forced himself to breathe. Electrical fire. Started in the east wing around 2 a.m. We woke to smoke. Naomi and I tried to reach Lila's room, but the hallway was engulfed. Firefighters said. He stopped, the words still razor-sharp after all these years. They said the wing collapsed before they could get inside. We found Naomi's remains. But Lila, nothing. They assumed she'd been consumed by the fire. Jada touched her scarred wrist unconsciously. But if you were found on the 405, Malcolm continued, his voice strengthening, miles away, with burns and this ring, someone must have gotten you out. Someone must have saved you. And then what? Panicked? Abandoned you? I don't remember, Jada whispered. I've tried. For years I've tried. What do you remember? Malcolm leaned forward, desperate. You mentioned dreams. Tell me. Jada closed her eyes, reaching for fragments that had haunted her entire life. A woman, she began slowly. Blonde hair, I think. She's singing. Always the same song. Slow, gentle. This little light of mine. Something like that. And the smell. She breathed in as if the memory had a scent. Sweet and warm. Peach cobbler, maybe? But mixed with something woody. Like cologne or perfume. Malcolm's breath caught in his throat. Cedarwood. The woman is holding me. Jada continued, eyes still closed, lost in the memory. I feel safe. So safe. And then, her voice changed, darkened. Fire. Everywhere. Screaming. Someone's carrying me fast, running. Everything's hot and bright and terrifying. And then nothing. Just waking up in a hospital with people I don't know. Malcolm stood abruptly, pacing to the window, his control finally shattering. This little light of mine, he said hoarsely. Naomi sang it every night. Lullaby. Always slightly off-key. And cedarwood. That was her signature perfume. She wore it religiously. And peach cobbler. He laughed a broken sound. Sunday tradition. Every single Sunday. With extra cinnamon. Lila used to say it smelled like love baking. Jada's eyes flew open, staring at him. I remember, she breathed. I remember thinking that. The smell was love. I remember that feeling. They stared at each other across the room, two strangers bound by impossible memories, by a ring that refused to let the past die. Malcolm's phone was in his hand before he'd consciously decided to move. Who found you? He demanded, voice rough. You said a shelter director. What was her name? Mrs. Loretta Jackson, Jada answered. Harbor Lights Group Home in Compton. Malcolm was already dialing, his assistant's number memorized. Find Loretta Jackson, director of Harbor Lights Group Home, Compton. I need her in my office, first thing, tomorrow morning. I don't care what it costs. Charter a helicopter if you have to. Just find her. He paused. And get me every police report, hospital record, and fire investigation file from December 2002. Everything related to the Bel Air fire and any child found near the 405 freeway that month. He ended the call and looked at Jada, at Lila. His mind insisted, really looked at her. And when she smiled nervously, uncertain, one dimple appeared on her right cheek. Naomi's dimple. His daughter's dimple. Tomorrow, Malcolm said, his voice barely above a whisper, we find out the truth. But deep down, in the place where logic couldn't reach, he already knew. His daughter had come home. Mrs. Loretta Jackson arrived at Hayes Intelligence Headquarters at precisely 9 a.m., dressed in a floral Sunday dress despite it being Tuesday, her silver streak hair pulled into a neat bun. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd spent decades caring for children the world had forgotten. Malcolm met her in his private office, all glass walls and minimalist furniture overlooking the Silicon Valley sprawl. But he couldn't sit still. He paced near the windows, while Jada perched nervously on the leather sofa, still wearing borrowed clothes from the mansion's guest suite. "Mrs. Jackson," Malcolm began, his voice tight with controlled desperation. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Loretta studied him with the knowing eyes of someone who'd seen every shade of human pain. Then she looked at Jada, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Certainty. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "I knew this day would come. Knew it in my bones." Malcolm stopped pacing. "You knew." Loretta settled into the chair across from Jada, reaching out to take the young woman's hand. "Baby girl, I always knew someone would come looking for you. That ring you wore, it wasn't some trinket from a dollar store. It was love made solid." She turned to Malcolm. "Mr. Hayes, the police found her on December 19th, 2002. Early morning, just after dawn. She was wandering the shoulder of the 405 near LAX barefoot, wearing a nightgown that was half burned away." Malcolm's hand gripped the back of his chair, knuckles white. "She couldn't have been more than 3, maybe 4 years old," Loretta continued. "Burns on her left arm, her feet torn up from walking on pavement. She was in shock, wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. But she clutched that diamond ring in her little fist, so tight they had to sedate her just to check if it was cutting her palm." Jada made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. The hospitals ran her through the system, missing children reports, Amber Alerts, everything. But back then, Loretta shook her head. Nobody connected a burned child found near LAX to a mansion fire in Bel Air. Different jurisdictions. Different worlds. How far is Harbor Lights from Bel Air? Malcolm's voice was barely audible. 23 miles, Loretta said. Might as well have been another planet. Malcolm turned to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. 23 miles. His daughter had been 23 miles away, and he'd never known. All those years of searching hospitals and shelters, and he'd never looked far enough. What happened after the hospital? He managed. She stayed in pediatric care for 2 months. The burns healed, but the memories didn't come back. No name, no family, no history. So she came to Harbor Lights. Loretta squeezed Jada's hand. "I kept the ring locked in my office safe. Knew it meant something. Knew it was the only thread connecting her to whoever she'd been." "Why did you give it back to her?" Malcolm asked, still facing the window. She was 7 years old, having nightmares every single night, screaming about fire and someone singing to her. "I thought." Loretta's voice wavered. "I thought maybe the ring would help her remember. Or maybe it would help someone find her. So I gave it to her and said, someone will come for you one day. Hold on to this until they do." The office fell silent except for the hum of computers and distant traffic below. Malcolm's shoulders began to shake. His reflection in the glass showed a man finally, completely breaking. "Excuse me," he choked out and strode from the office. In the hallway, Malcolm collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the polished floor. 23 years of grief, contained, controlled, buried under work and logic and forward momentum, erupted all at once. He wept like he hadn't since the funeral, since the day they'd buried an empty coffin with Lila's name on it because they'd had nothing else to bury. His daughter had been alone, burned, terrified, wandering a freeway at dawn while he'd been at the hospital, sedated, destroyed. She'd been alive, and he'd given up searching. Through the glass wall, he could see Loretta holding Jada while she cried, the older woman rocking her gently, the way she must have done 1,000 times when Jada was small and nameless and broken. Malcolm pressed his palms against his eyes and tried to breathe. Eventually, his assistant appeared with water and tissues and the discretion to say nothing. Malcolm pulled himself together the way he'd been doing for decades, piece by piece, wall by wall. When he returned to the office, both women looked up. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "Don't you dare apologize for feeling," Loretta said firmly. "You've earned every tear." Malcolm nodded, then addressed Jada. "I'm arranging DNA testing. Expedited. But in the meantime..." He paused. Would you stay? At the mansion? Just until we have answers. Jada looked terrified. Mr. Hayes, I don't belong in a place like that. I'm a waitress. I live in a studio apartment with 2 roommates. I can't. You belong wherever you choose to be, Malcolm interrupted gently. And if you are my daughter, you've already survived more than most people endure in a lifetime. You don't need to fit into my world. My world needs to make room for you. Jada glanced at Loretta, who nodded encouragingly. Okay, she whispered. For now. That evening, Malcolm worked late in his home office, trying to focus on emails he couldn't process. Around 9 p.m., a scent drifted through the mansion that stopped him mid-sentence. Cinnamon, brown sugar, peaches. His heart lurched. He found Jada in the industrial kitchen, pulling a small cobbler from the oven. She'd changed into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back, looking more relaxed than she had all day. I'm sorry, she said quickly when she saw him. I couldn't sleep. I always bake when I'm anxious. I found the ingredients in the pantry, and She trailed off, uncertain. Malcolm approached slowly, like she might spook and vanish. The cobbler sat cooling on the counter, its lattice crust golden brown, steam rising with that achingly familiar scent. Naomi made this every Sunday, Malcolm said, his voice cracking despite his best efforts. Exactly like this, with a crisscross pattern on top, extra cinnamon. Jada stared at the cobbler, then at her own hands. I just know how to make it. Don't know where I learned. It's like my hands remember even though my brain doesn't. Malcolm pulled out 2 plates with shaking hands. Neither spoke as Jada served them both, adding a scoop of vanilla ice cream from the freezer like it was the most natural thing in the world. They sat at the marble kitchen counter in silence, a tech billionaire and a waitress, or a father and daughter, depending on which truth you believed. Malcolm took a bite. The taste exploded through him. Naomi's recipe, exactly, down to the hint of nutmeg she'd always added but never admitted to. It's perfect, he whispered. Jada ate slowly, and when she closed her eyes, a single tear slid down her cheek. It tastes like... She stopped, searching for words that didn't exist. Like something I lost. Like home. Malcolm reached across the counter, covering her hand with his. She didn't pull away. They finished the cobbler in silence, 2 strangers bound by taste and scent and the ghost of a woman who'd loved them both. Outside, Los Angeles glittered in the darkness, indifferent to miracles. But in that kitchen, surrounded by the smell of peaches and cinnamon and memory, something impossible was knitting itself back together. 1 bite at a time. 3 days after the cobbler, Malcolm drove Jada to Bel Air. She'd been quiet all morning, picking at breakfast, staring out the windows of his current mansion as if memorizing escape routes. When he'd suggested visiting the original property, the one that had burned, she'd gone pale but nodded. Now they wound through manicured streets where houses hid behind gates and hedges, where wealth whispered instead of shouted. Jada pressed closer to the car door with each turn, making herself smaller. It's just a house, Malcolm said gently, though they both knew he was lying. A house you've kept for 23 years, Jada countered. That's not just anything. He couldn't argue with that. The gate opened automatically, and the mansion revealed itself, a sprawling Mediterranean revival estate, white stucco and terracotta, surrounded by ancient oaks and manicured gardens. Beautiful, restored, perfect, except for the east wing. That section remained cordoned off with temporary fencing, the windows boarded, the stucco stained with old smoke damage that no amount of power washing could erase. Malcolm parked in the circular driveway. Neither of them moved. I had everything rebuilt, he said quietly. New kitchen, new master suite, new west wing. But that section, he gestured toward the burned wing. I couldn't. Part of me always thought she might walk back through that door, that if I demolished it, I'd be giving up, admitting she was really gone. Jada stared at the boarded windows, something flickering across her face. Not quite recognition, more like déjà vu sharper, more painful cousin. Can we go inside? She asked. The foyer took Jada's breath away. 2 stories of cream marble, A crystal chandelier catching afternoon light. A spiral staircase curving upward like something from a dream. She stopped moving. Malcolm watched her face carefully, seeing the shift, the way her eyes lost focus, seeing something beyond what was physically there. There was a piano, Jada whispered, pointing to an empty space near the windows. A black grand piano. Someone played. Chopin, I think. Nocturnes. Malcolm's throat tightened. Naomi played. Every evening before dinner. Her favorite was Nocturne Op. 9 No. 2. Jada walked toward the staircase like a woman in a trance, her fingers trailing the banister. I used to slide down this. In pajamas. Someone would catch me at the bottom and swing me around. That was me, Malcolm said hoarsely. You'd squeal so loud Naomi would pretend to be annoyed, but she was always laughing. Jada climbed 3 steps, then stopped, listening to something only she could hear. There's laughter. A woman's laughter. It echoes different here, like the house remembers it. She turned to look at Malcolm, her eyes glistening. Why does this place feel like I've been here before? Because you have, Malcolm said simply. You lived here. This was your home. They walked through rooms that triggered fragments, the library where Jada remembered someone reading to her, the kitchen where she knew instinctively where the cookie jar had been, top left cabinet, behind the cereal. Each room layered memory over reality until Jada was trembling. I need air, she gasped. Malcolm led her through French doors to the back garden. The garden sprawled across 2 acres, rose bushes, jasmine climbing trellises, a stone fountain gurgling peacefully. Jada stepped onto the flagstone path and stopped so abruptly Malcolm nearly collided with her. What is it? She didn't answer, just walked forward slowly, veering off the path toward an enormous oak tree near the garden's edge. Its branches spread like protective arms, leaves rustling in the breeze. Jada stopped beneath it, staring at the ground. There was a swing here, she said, her voice strange and distant. A red swing with yellow ropes. Malcolm felt his heart hammering. Yes. We installed it the summer before the fire. Jada dropped to her knees, pushing aside overgrown grass and fallen leaves. Her fingers found something metal, corroded but unmistakable, the rusted frame of a swing set, half buried in earth and time. She pulled at it, unearthing the curved metal piece by piece. One of the chains was still attached, its links orange with rust. Mommy pushed me, Jada whispered, touching the chain like it was sacred. I'd say higher, higher, and she'd laugh and say you'll touch the sky, baby girl. And I believed her. I believed I could touch the sky if she just pushed hard enough. Her voice broke. Malcolm knelt beside her in the grass, his expensive suit forgotten. He watched her trace the swing's frame, watched 23 years of loss crystallize into this single rusted artifact. You remember, he breathed. I remember the feeling, Jada corrected, tears streaming freely now. The safety, the joy, the absolute certainty that nothing bad could ever happen because she was there. Because, she looked up at Malcolm. Because you were both there. Something in Malcolm's chest cracked open, not breaking, but expanding, making room for something he thought was dead. He reached for her hesitantly, unsure if he had the right. But Jada leaned into them, and suddenly they were holding each other in the grass beneath the oak tree, 2 people trying to bridge 23 years of absence with a single embrace. I can't remember her face, Jada sobbed into his shoulder. I can remember everything else, her smell, her voice, the way she felt, but I can't see her face. I have photos, Malcolm said, his own tears soaking into her hair. Hundreds. Videos. I can show you her face. I can show you everything. Jada pulled back, searching his face. What if the DNA test says I'm not her? What if I'm just someone who happened to have the ring, and all these memories are just coincidence? Malcolm cupped her face gently, the gesture instinctive and paternal. Then you're still someone who lost everything and survived. Someone strong enough to build a life from nothing. And that would still be extraordinary. But you want me to be her, Jada whispered. I can see it. You want it so badly. Yes, Malcolm admitted. God help me, yes. But I also want you to be whoever you are, with or without the DNA. Because that woman who makes cobbler in my kitchen at midnight, who looks at me like I'm not terrifying. I want to know her. I want her in my life." Jada smiled through tears, that dimple appearing. "You are kind of terrifying. I get that a lot." They might have stayed there longer, kneeling in the grass, piecing together fragments of a shattered past. But Malcolm's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He pulled it out, saw the name on the screen, Dr. Marcus Reed. His hand started shaking. "It's the DNA lab," he said. Jada went rigid. "Already. I paid for expedited processing." Malcolm stared at the phone, terrified to answer. Terrified not to. Jada stood, brushing grass from her jeans with trembling hands. "Answer it." Malcolm stood beside her, both of them beneath the oak tree where a child had once touched the sky. He pressed accept and put the phone on speaker. "Mr. Hayes," Dr. Reed's calm, professional voice filled the garden. "I have your results. Are you in a private location?" "Yes," Malcolm managed. "Jada's here with me. We're ready." A pause that lasted a lifetime. "The results are conclusive," Dr. Reed said. Jada grabbed Malcolm's arm, steadying herself. "Based on the DNA analysis, there is a 99.99% probability that Jada Elise Carter is the biological daughter of Malcolm Hayes and the late Naomi Hayes." The world stopped. The garden, the oak tree, the rusted swing. Everything froze in crystalline clarity. Jada made a sound like all the air had left her lungs. Malcolm caught her as her knees buckled, holding her upright while his own legs threatened to give out. "Say that again," Malcolm whispered into the phone. "She's your daughter, Mr. Hayes," Dr. Reed said gently. "Jada is Lila." The phone slipped from Malcolm's hand, landing softly in the grass. And then he was holding his daughter, his Lila Bean, while she sobbed into his chest and 23 years of grief transformed into something else entirely. Not closure, not an ending, a beginning. They stayed in the garden until the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Malcolm held his daughter, the words still surreal, while she cried herself dry. When they finally pulled apart, both their faces were swollen, mascara and dignity long abandoned. "We should go inside," Malcolm said softly. "Dr. Reed is sending the official report." Jada nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve like a child. The gesture was so achingly familiar. Lila had done the same thing when she was small, that Malcolm had to look away. By the time they reached Malcolm's current mansion, dusk had settled over Los Angeles. The city glittered below his office windows, indifferent and beautiful. Dr. Reed had emailed the official documentation, pages of genetic markers, probability calculations, medical terminology that reduced a miracle to science. But Malcolm had already known, had known from the moment he saw the ring, had known from the peach cobbler, the dimple, the way she touched the rusted swing. Jada stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. What happens now? Malcolm had been asking himself the same question. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've spent 23 years imagining finding you, but I never got past that part. Never imagined what comes after." She turned to face him, and in the fading light, she looked impossibly young. "Lost. I don't know how to be your daughter." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Malcolm set down the report, moving to stand beside her at the window. "I don't know how to be a father anymore," he confessed. "The last time I was a dad, you were 3 years old. You needed bedtime stories and piggyback rides and someone to check for monsters under the bed." He managed a weak smile. "I'm guessing you've outgrown most of that." Jada laughed, a small broken sound. "Slightly." They stood in silence, watching the city lights multiply as night deepened. "I'm terrified," Jada finally said. "Terrified I'll disappoint you. That I won't be the daughter you've been mourning. That I'm too different, too damaged, too late." "You could never be too late," Malcolm said fiercely. "And you're not damaged. You're a survivor. You built a life from nothing. That takes more strength than anything I've ever done." "But what if?" "Jada." He turned to face her fully. "Lila, whatever name you choose, I don't need you to be who you were at 3 years old. I need you to be who you are now. The woman who makes cobbler at midnight and remembers the sky. That's who I want to know. That's who I want in my life. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm scared of wanting this too much. Of letting myself believe I finally have a family. And then... I'm not going anywhere, Malcolm interrupted. I've spent 23 years in hell. I'm not wasting whatever time we have left. Jada wiped her eyes, that familiar gesture. Okay, so we figure it out together. Together, Malcolm agreed. He reached up, unclasping the chain from around his neck. Naomi's ring, the adult version, caught the lamplight as he held it between them. This was hers, he said quietly. And this, he gestured to the smaller ring on Jada's finger, was always meant to be yours. Jada looked down at her hand, at the platinum band she'd worn for 19 years without understanding its weight. Malcolm held out his palm. After a moment's hesitation, Jada slipped her ring off and placed it beside its twin in his hand. Two rings. Two halves of the same love story. Different sizes, same engraving, reunited at last. Malcolm's hands trembled as he slipped both rings onto Naomi's chain and fastened it around Jada's neck. They hung together, catching light, tangible proof that love survives fire, time, and distance. Together, Jada whispered, touching the rings. Together, Malcolm echoed. And for the first time in 23 years, the word family meant something more than memory. It meant possibility. The first 3 weeks were a blur of discovery and disorientation. Malcolm gave Jada access to everything. Photo albums dating back to before she was born, home videos of birthday parties and Christmas mornings, Naomi's recipe box with handwritten notes in the margins. Each artifact was a puzzle piece, filling in a past Jada had lived but couldn't remember. There was 3-year-old Lila, covered in finger paint, laughing at the camera. Lila in a tiny chef's hat, helping Naomi bake. Lila asleep in Malcolm's arms, her curls wild against his shoulder. Jada watched the videos until she could recite them, studying the little girl she'd been, searching for traces of herself. But the world wouldn't let her grieve and heal in private. The story broke on a slow news day. Tech billionaire's daughter rises from the ashes, literally. Within hours, paparazzi camped outside the gates. Tabloids ran with the billionaire's lost heir and Cinderella story of the century. Her face, scraped from social media, appeared on magazine covers she'd never agreed to. Strangers dissected her past on talk shows. Former classmates sold stories to gossip sites. Someone found her old apartment and photographed her bedroom window. Jada felt like she was suffocating under glass. One morning, she woke to a helicopter hovering over the mansion, a telephoto lens pointed at her bedroom. Something inside her snapped. She was gone before Malcolm woke up. Mrs. Loretta Jackson found Jada sitting on the front steps of Harbor Lights, knees pulled to her chest, looking exactly like the terrified 4-year-old who'd arrived 22 years ago. "Baby girl," Loretta said softly, settling beside her with a grunt. "Thought you might show up here." "I can't do it," Jada whispered. "I can't be who they want me to be. The perfect lost daughter. The miracle. I'm just me. A waitress who burns toast and can't parallel park. I don't belong in that world." Loretta was quiet for a moment, watching kids play basketball in the cracked driveway. "You know what I learned in 40 years of running this place," she finally said. "Family isn't where you start. It's who you choose to keep walking with, even when the road gets hard. But what if I fail him? What if I can't be enough? Enough for who? The tabloids? They don't matter. Your father." Loretta took Jada's hand. "That man spent 23 years in the dark. You brought him back to the light. You're already more than enough." Jada leaned her head on Loretta's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of cocoa butter and wisdom. "How do I do this?" she asked. "One day at a time, baby. Same as everything else." Malcolm arrived an hour later, having tracked her phone. He looked disheveled, worried, more human than Billionaire. He sat on the steps on Jada's other side, maintaining respectful distance. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have protected you from the media circus. Should have anticipated." "You can't control everything," Jada interrupted gently. Malcolm laughed bitterly. "I spent years trying to control the future because I couldn't save the past, thinking if I just worked hard enough, was successful enough, powerful enough, I could prevent more loss." They sat in silence, watching the sunset paint Compton in shades of gold. "Maybe control isn't what we need," Jada said softly. "Maybe it's forgiveness. Forgiveness. For not being perfect. For being human. For," she swallowed hard, "for surviving when Mom didn't." Malcolm's breath hitched. He'd never articulated that guilt, but it had lived in him for decades. The weight of being the one who walked away from the fire. "She saved you," he said hoarsely. "Naomi. Somehow she got you out. That was her choice. Her love." Jada turned to him, eyes bright with tears. "Then maybe we honor that. Not by being perfect, but by actually living. By choosing each other every day, even when it's hard." Malcolm looked at this remarkable woman, his daughter, who'd survived fire and abandonment and still had the courage to choose hope, and felt something shift in his chest. "Together?" he asked. "Together," Jada confirmed. They sat on those steps until the stars appeared, talking about Naomi, about fears, about building a life that honored the past without being trapped by it. When they finally stood to leave, Jada touched the chain around her neck, both rings resting against her heart. Her mother's love, her father's devotion, two halves of her history reunited. She was carrying her family with her. And for the first time since the gala, that felt like enough. 1 year later, the Hayes mansion blazed with light again. But this gala was different. No corporate sponsors, no networking deals whispered over champagne. Tonight was about something that mattered. The launch of Project Phoenix, a nonprofit dedicated to reuniting families separated by tragedy and supporting burn survivors rebuilding their lives. Jada stood backstage in a simple navy dress, the chain with both rings visible at her throat. She'd kept her catering job for 6 months before finally accepting that she could do more good elsewhere. Now she ran Project Phoenix full-time, her Compton roots keeping her grounded, while Malcolm's resources gave her wings. "5 minutes, Ms. Hayes," a stagehand said. She still startled at the name. Legally, she was Lila Naomi Hayes again, but she'd kept Jada in daily life, a bridge between who she'd been and who she was becoming. Most people split the difference and called her JL. Malcolm appeared beside her, elegant in a tailored suit, the silver at his temples more pronounced now. But his eyes were different, warmer, more alive. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, seemed less like a man haunted by ghosts, and more like one learning to live again. "Ready?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "Good. Means it matters." He squeezed her hand. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Jada touched the rings. "I hope so." The ballroom fell silent as Jada took the stage, 300 faces turning toward her. Some she recognized, Loretta Jackson in the front row, beaming. Dr. Marcus Reed, former Harbor Lights kids, who'd become Project Phoenix's first success stories. Others were strangers drawn by the impossible story of the girl who'd survived fire and found her way home. Jada gripped the microphone, took a breath, and began. "I spent 23 years wondering where I came from," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Growing up, I had this constant ache, this feeling that something was missing, a piece of myself I couldn't name or find." She paused, finding Malcolm in the wings. He nodded encouragement. "I thought finding my past would fix that emptiness, that knowing my name, my history, would make me whole." She touched the rings at her throat. "But what I learned is that we're not defined by where we start. We're defined by who we choose to become and who chooses to walk beside us." Her voice grew stronger. "Love has a way of finding you, even through fire, through distance, through decades of silence. It survives in unexpected ways. In a ring passed down. In a recipe your hands remember. In the courage to keep hoping when logic says hope is foolish. Emotion crept into her words. My mother, Naomi Hayes, died saving me. I don't remember her face, but I remember her love. It protected me through foster care, through loneliness, through every moment I felt lost. And it led me back here, to my father, to my name, to my purpose. Malcolm stepped onto the stage, standing beside her as they'd planned. Together, they pulled a cord, unveiling a portrait that had been covered until this moment. Naomi Hayes gazed out from the canvas, blonde hair catching light, eyes bright with laughter, smile radiant and alive. Below it, a bronze plaque read, "Love survives the flames, Project Phoenix, in memory of Naomi Hayes." The audience erupted in applause. Several people were crying. As the applause faded, a familiar melody began, soft, gentle, played by a single violin. "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." Malcolm turned to Jada, extending his hand with old-fashioned formality. "May I have this dance, Lila?" Jada smiled through tears, that dimple appearing. "It's Jada now, but yes, Dad." He led her to the center of the floor as the band continued the lullaby Naomi had sung 24 years ago. Other couples joined them, Loretta dancing with one of the Harbor Lights teens, burn survivors swaying with the families who'd never stop searching. Malcolm held his daughter carefully, like she might disappear if he gripped too tight. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For coming back. For giving me a reason to be human again." Jada rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for never truly giving up. For wearing that ring all those years. For being the lighthouse that guided me home." The rings at her throat caught the chandelier light, glinting together. Two halves of one love, reunited at last. As the song faded, Malcolm kissed her forehead gently. "Your mother would have loved seeing you like this." "I think she does see," Jada said softly. Somehow. Hours later, after the guests had departed and the mansion fell quiet, Jada climbed the stairs to what had once been her childhood bedroom. Malcolm had kept it preserved after the restoration, and she'd slowly made it hers again, old memories mixing with new life. She stepped onto the balcony, the cool night air carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden below. Los Angeles sprawled beneath her, a galaxy of lights stretching to the horizon. Jada touched the rings at her throat, warm from her skin, heavy with history. "We found each other, Mom," she whispered to the stars. "Dad and me. We're okay. We're healing." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she smiled through it. "I still miss you every day. I wish I remembered your face without photos. I wish I'd had more time. I wish." Her voice broke. "I wish you could see who I've become." Below, through the open windows, she heard Malcolm's laughter, genuine and unguarded, as he talked with Mrs. Jackson in the kitchen. Not the hollow man from the gala a year ago, but someone learning joy again. Peace settled over Jada, not the peace of perfection or closure, but something more honest. The peace of acceptance, of knowing grief and gratitude could coexist. That healing didn't mean forgetting. She touched the rings one more time, then turned back inside. Tomorrow, Project Phoenix would help 3 families reunite. Next week, they'd fund a burn center in Compton. Next month, she'd give a speech in Sacramento about reforming the foster system. The work would continue. The healing would continue. Love would continue. Because that's what survived, not the mansion or the money or even the memories. Love survived. Love adapted. Love found a way, even through fire. Love doesn't erase the scars, it grows around them, making them part of your story instead of the end of it. And sometimes, the ring you wear isn't a symbol of what was lost, but what was found again. What was always there waiting. What refused to let go, even when the world burned. This is the story of Jada Hayes, of Malcolm Hayes, of Naomi Hayes, whose love outlasted flames and death and time itself. This is the story of coming home. Love doesn't erase the scars, it grows around them, making them part of your story instead of the end of it. And sometimes, the ring you wear isn't a symbol of what was lost, but what was found again. What was always there waiting. What refused to let go, even when the world burned. This is the story of Jada Hayes, of Malcolm Hayes, of Naomi Hayes, whose love outlasted flames and death and time itself. This is the story of coming home.